Communist savagery. Communism has never led to anything other than killing, destruction, and suffering. Tens of millions of people have been forced to migrate, subjected to systematic famine, and worked to death like slaves in labor camps. Millions of people have been the targets of shootings by communist terror organizations, or else they have lived in fear of being so targeted. You are now about to see a few examples of the savagery inflicted by the communist ideology, which attaches no value to human beings. Lenin seized all the peasants' products and seeds and abandoned 29 million people to starve to death between 1921 to 1922. 5 million of these people died of famine after long suffering. Stalin established requisitioning detachments that would confiscate peasants' harvests by force. As a result, 6 million people died of famine in the most horrible manner. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of tons of cereals were actually exported to prevent other countries from becoming aware of this evil. In Stalin's time, it was a serious crime to sell grain on the market, have an employee to help with the harvest, or even possess 2 samovars. Peasants were arrested on the pretext that they had taken part in commerce when they had sold something of their own making. Famine caused the deaths of 6 million men, women, children, old people, and infants in Stalin's time, not because Soviet farms produced insufficient grain, but because the Communist Party wanted this man-made famine to happen. In other words, it was mass murder. Many people were sent to concentration camps known as gulags in the time of the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, where they were worked to death under extremely harsh conditions. Most people never left the camps alive. Millions of workers and peasants who revolted against the Bolshevik regime between 1918 and 1953 were slaughtered. Following the Red Army's invasion of Afghanistan, it employed the most despicable methods against Muslims. They made mines that resembled toys so that Afghan children would pick them up. Captured religious fighters were horribly tortured, and the civilian population was shelled without the slightest compunction. Mao seized power in China with the Communist Revolution in 1949 and instituted a program known as the Great Leap Forward in the mid-1950s. As with the Soviets, that project also inflicted famine and misery on the people. The famine across China in 1958 to 1961, caused by Mao's Great Leap Forward, is regarded as the worst and deadliest famine ever. Up to 40 million people died. That is the equivalent of the entire population of Turkey at that time. Prisoners in Mao's time were forced to work in mines, where 300 people a day would die. Prisoners were buried alive, humiliated, and subjected to the most horrible maltreatment. Mao later initiated the Cultural Revolution, ostensibly so that the people would understand communism better. Thousands of senior bureaucrats, university teachers, scientists, and intellectuals were later rounded up and executed after being tortured for opposition to communism. Mao's Red Guards arrested tens of thousands of people, tortured and executed them solely for listening to music, having a pet animal, or engaging in worship. Between 6 and 10 million people were killed under Mao's directives, and another 20 million counter-revolutionaries spent much of their lives in prison. Following Mao's seizure of power, a systematic genocide began being employed against the Uyghur Turks of East Turkestan. Uyghur Turks were forbidden by the Chinese communists to perform their religious observances, schools and places of worship were closed, clergy in many areas were arrested, and a great many of these were martyred. 2.8 million Muslim Uyghur Turks were martyred by the Chinese in various ways between 1949 and 1952. 3.5 million between 1952 to 1957, 6.7 million in 1958 to 1960, and 13 million between 1961 and 1965. Between 1975 and 1979, the communist Khmer Rouge turned the rice paddies of Cambodia into killing fields. 3 million of the country's total 9 million population were either shot, hacked to pieces, or suffocated with bags over their heads, or simply left to starve. A deliberate famine was also set in motion by the communist regime in Cambodia. Despite people starving to death in the country, only 1/5 of its arable land was permitted to be used for agriculture. Under the regime of the communist Ho Chi Minh, 40,000 people were packed into spaces intended for 8,000 in the prisons between 1975 and 1977. Prisoners either starved, suffocated, were tortured to death, or killed themselves. These are just some of the ruthless practices of communism. Those who seek social justice can never find it in communism because social justice within communism means misery and poverty. Communism exploits people, eliminates art, science, and joy, and turns people into little more than unhappy automatons. No artist, scientist, or intellectual with a free mind ever emerges from a communist society. It is impossible for communism, which denies that humans are entities with souls and regards them as a type of animal, to establish an order based on happiness, peace, prosperity, and security. Human beings are not valued under the communist system. The prevailing idea is one of, there are many members of the herd, so if one gets lost, it does not matter. Those who are handicapped or cannot work are regarded as sickly and harmful, and often left to die. There is no conception of forgiveness, compassion, or loyalty. People's moral values, intentions, or state of mind are never considered. Since there is no altruism, everyone thinks of himself first, and thus society fails to progress. Since people have no compassion, it is impossible for there to be peace in society. The just system desired by those who seek social justice exists solely in Islam, in the Quran. All people, men and women, are equal and protected under Islamic values. Love of humanity is what counts in Islam. Everyone, be they sick, handicapped, or elderly, is protected. Nobody goes hungry while there are those around who have enough to eat. There is no compulsion or obligation. Even unbelievers are helped and shown affection. Everyone is protected and watched over in a society that lives by Islamic moral values. There is love and respect. The social justice that is sought can only be a reality under the moral values of the Quran, not under ideologies that have slaughtered millions.